A lot of the Black community needs to be addressed. I am tired of Black people pretending like they are the ones that didn't start slavery because they were, and I'm tired of them pretending that white people didn't die to end slavery because we were. I'm also tired of pretending that there are still slaves today and all of the slave owners are, you guessed it, people of color. I'm also tired of pretending that there weren't white slaves as well. And I think that a lot of people in the Black community avoid these truths. I pissed off the Black community. I definitely pissed off the Black community, and it is what it is. I don't know what you want me to tell you. But apparently I am uneducated. So let's go through why I said what I said.
Welcome to World Moving Trend. On today's topic, we'll be discussing quite a lot of issues that are trending in the United States of America between the white community and the Black community. And this is to say that this discussion is for educational purpose alone, and it's not to discriminate, rather it's to bring more light, shed more light into topics and issues that is affecting our world and all that. Credits belong to all the content creators in these videos, so we'll be diving into it straight up. So there's been a lot of front and back between the white community and the Black community on slavery. A woman claiming that slavery was perpetuated or was brought by the Black people, that the Black people enslaved themselves and all that. So there's a lot of reaction on that, and there's a lot of clarity, by people. So we wanted to bring that to you. So we'll be right back. Sit back and enjoy. I'll be right back.
A lot of the Black community needs to be addressed. I am tired of Black people pretending like they are the ones that didn't start slavery because they were, and I'm tired of them pretending that white people didn't die to end slavery because we were. I'm also tired of pretending that there are still slaves today and all of the slave owners are, you guessed it, people of color. I'm also tired of pretending that there weren't white slaves as well. And I think that a lot of people in the Black community avoid these truths because they want to try and move up in this country without having to do the hard work.
I got a problem with this video. I do. This lady should have had a chef's hat on and one of those chef's jackets because she came here to cook and I wasn't ready. I would have had my knife and fork, everything. I wasn't ready. Here's the thing about the truth. The truth is never pretty. Some people need that ugly truth right in front of them. This lady didn't tell a single lie. The only problem she's getting flack because of this video is because she told the truth. And a lot of people really don't like the truth. A lot of people don't like being told what's right in front of their face. A lot of people don't like being put in a position where they're forced to now stand face to face with facts. Facts famously don't care about your feelings. Aside from this lady cooking and I wasn't ready for it, I have no problem with anything she said because it's all factually correct. And if you have a problem with these facts, that's a you problem. That has nothing to do with her. The first person who ever said Black folks need to stand up on their own and accept responsibility for all their own decisions and everything that happens to them, all their own actions, was Frederick Douglass. You gonna call him racist? You gonna call Frederick Douglass racist? He's the one who said it. Booker T. Washington said, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. George Washington Carver said, cast your bucket down where it is and work. So, all these people have been saying the same thing for a century, a little over a century. And people didn't have a problem with it then. Why is there a problem with it now? Facts are wonderful things. Keep telling the truth. Zeke Arkham, got your 6. Bye.
The Black community. I definitely pissed off the Black community, and it is what it is. I don't know what you want me to tell you. But apparently I'm uneducated. So let's go through why I said what I said in that video, because I stand 10 toes down on it. Back in the 1600s, Black people, specifically Africans, were not just stolen. They were sold off by other Africans. But at that time, slavery wasn't really a term or a thing. They had indentured servants. These servants had time limits of how long they were going to be working. So after these 3 years, you're free to go. And honestly, truthfully, a lot of these men and women chose to become indentured servants because it wasn't a forever thing, it wasn't a long thing, and they would be able to freely come into America. Not saying that it was right. I'm just saying some of these men and women did go by choice so they could leave their home country. Most of the people that were put into servitude, it was for a few reasons. It could have been they were captured and sold off, they could have committed a crime, or they were indebted to somebody, they owed someone something. What I said in my video was that Black people created slavery. They started slavery. What I didn't specify was that I clarified this in the comments immediately after uploading, but just not in the video specifically, but before this drama took place. I clarified it right when I put up the video. But I was talking about in the US, not the entire world, because that predates what 10,000 years. I was not getting into all that. So I was talking about here at home. That is because of Anthony Johnson, who back in the 1620s was a servant, not a slave, a servant. So eventually, when he was done with his servitude, he was given his freedom. And this man accumulated so much money. He was making so much money that he ended up purchasing a bunch of land. Now, he accumulated over 200 acres of land over that time, and he also accumulated about 15 to 16 slaves, 6 or 7 of them being African American, and the rest being white. Or, I'm sorry, servants, not slaves. Things went awry a few years later, around 1653, I think, one of those, where one of his servants, last name of Kaser or Kasser, left because he claimed that his servitude was up and expired, so he left to go work for a different owner. Anthony Johnson then brought it to court and sued that family to have Kasser be returned to him. After a couple of years through the Virginia court system, they actually went in Johnson's favor and brought Kasser back to Anthony Johnson, claiming him as a slave for life, thus creating slavery, legal slavery, not servitude, legal slavery here in America. It was because of Anthony Johnson, who was a black man. Every single background and origin on the planet has been oppressed or enslaved or servants at some point in time. The white race did not invent slavery, but they were the race that ended it. It wasn't even a race issue when it was first created. It was a class issue. I say in many, many other videos, if I missed anything or forgot anything or didn't know something, feel free to comment it below. I don't care. I'm always open to conversation. I love talking about this kind of stuff. But for tens of thousands of black people to get up in my comments daily and call me uneducated or God knows what else, yet not one of them actually is doing the educating, how do you expect people to learn if you are unapproachable and mean?
Oh, okay. That was something. But you said you wanted to be educated, right? I mean, that's what you said. So come on in and hurry up because you didn't already miss too many classes as it is. Let's jump right in, shall we? And start with the fact that you didn't just miss a few details here. What you did was build an entire argument on half-truths and then acted confused when people reacted. And I took a look at your page because I was trying to understand the voice that you're speaking from. And it's clear to me that you try to present yourself as someone who tells hard truths, as someone who leans into uncomfortable conversations that other people might avoid. But what you said wasn't controversial, it wasn't bold, it was incorrect. And what really stood out to me is how you tried to frame it as confidence, opening with, "I'm standing 10 toes down," which is ironic because your first instinct was to borrow language rooted in black culture, while speaking negatively about black commenters just to make your point feel more solid than it actually was. But I digress. Because the way you ended the video told a completely different story. You said, "Educate me. Hey, I love these conversations. Don't just get on here and be mean." But your words and your delivery are completely incongruent. Your tone is defensive, and there's a level of condescension in how you speak, followed by a pivot into victimhood the moment people respond. That's not standing 10 toes down. That's you realizing that the response wasn't what you expected, so you're trying to soften the impact. If you really loved these conversations, right? If you actually wanted to learn and teach others, you wouldn't speak in that level of arrogance to the very people whose ancestors were impacted by over 400 years of this brutal history. And those people, by the way, have every right to feel emotional about it. The real question is, why are you? So this isn't about people being mean. It's about you speaking boldly on something that you're not fully informed on, and then asking for softness the moment that you're corrected. Now let's get into your claims, because this is where things really start to fall apart, okay? You first say that you didn't want to get into the slavery that existed outside of America because it was too much and it went too far back. But then you brought it up multiple times, but only when it supported your point. So which is it? Is it too much to get into, or is it something that you're comfortable using when it helps your argument? Because you can't selectively pull from a broader history to support your point and then ignore that same history when it complicates it. You reached outside of America to say that Africans sold Africans and that slavery existed before it became racial. And I already know that your next move will say, well, that wasn't real slavery, it was indentured servitude. But if that's the case, then you can't use it to support your argument in the first place. Either it counts as part of the history or it doesn't. Because the moment you pull from that broader timeline, you also then have to acknowledge that systems of enslavement existed long before America, which effectively means that Black Americans could not have created it as you claim. The real truth is that no one race or group invented slavery or back then indentured servitude. It shows up independently across multiple civilizations thousands of years before America even existed. So you can't have it both ways. Either we stay within the context of American slavery or we include the full global history. But the moment you open that door, your entire argument collapses. So we'll focus on American slavery. Next, your entire argument hinges on the idea that Anthony Johnson, a Black man, won a court case in 1655, and somehow that means that Black people created slavery in America. Yes, he was a Black man who won a court case, but using that to claim Black people created slavery completely ignores the fact that the legal framework, the court systems, and the power structures making that ruling possible were already being built and controlled by white colonial authorities. That case didn't create the system. It operated within a system that was already taking shape. If anything, it honestly just shows how the colonies were already shifting toward lifetime servitude and how those courts were willing to enforce it. One case inside of a system does not equal authorship of the system. And what you completely fail to mention are cases like John Punch in 1640, 15 years before your Anthony Johnson example. He was a Black man sentenced to lifetime servitude while the white men with him only received extended contracts. That's one of the earliest legal distinctions between Black and white labor in the colonies. That's the foundation of racial slavery, not Anthony Johnson. You then go on to say that slavery wasn't about race, it was about class. And yes, early on there were systems that looked like that. But in America, it was intentionally transformed into something else. Laws were put into place to make blackness synonymous with enslavement. And that didn't just happen because one black man won a court case. This required legislation. It required court rulings, plural, policies that were written, enforced, and expanded over time. Make no mistake, this was a system that had to be codified, built piece by piece, decision by decision, until blackness itself became the condition for lifelong, inheritable enslavement. That was not accidental, and it wasn't created in a single moment, but it was constructed here, in the colonies, by white power structures. You also brought up that all races were enslaved at one point. And yes, different groups experienced forms of enslavement throughout history. But the way you're using that point makes it seem like you're trying to equalize these experiences. And they're not the same, not even close. What was built in America wasn't just another version of what existed before. The scale, the permanence, and the racialization of it were fundamentally different. So collapsing all of that into everyone experienced slavery doesn't clarify anything. It actually just erases the horrific reality of what actually happened. And saying white people didn't invent slavery, but they ended it, while completely ignoring who built, expanded, and profited from this system becomes even more misleading when you actually look at what was created here. Because while forms of slavery existed before, the racial hereditary system of chattel slavery in America was constructed and formalized and enforced by European colonial authorities. And that wasn't incidental, it was strategically engineered. So you don't get to erase who built the system and then turn around and take credit for ending it. So no, black people did not invent slavery. But you know what black people did invent though? The technologies that led to the Wi-Fi you abused to come on here and stand 10 toes down on and miseducate people with. Lastly, I saw your comments and this whole no one is educating me, everyone's just being mean narrative. People are correcting you. You're just not engaging with the corrections. Instead, you're deflecting and defending the original take. This isn't about people being unapproachable. It's about you speaking confidently on a topic that requires more depth than a few surface level facts. If you actually want the conversation, then start with the full history and stop trying to shape it to fit the narrative that you want to push. Because the audacity to speak this confidently and this dismissively on a topic like this, while being incomplete in your understanding, is exactly why people are correcting you.
History is teaching white Americans how white slave owners raped, beat, humiliated, mutilated, murdered, and cannibalized their slaves. Accurate history is teaching that George Washington's false teeth were made out of his slaves' teeth. Accurate history is teaching that Abraham Lincoln may have said some words and signed some shit, but he did not physically do anything to free the slaves. The white abolitionists also often get almost total credit for freeing the slaves. I bet you've never even asked yourself what the slaves were doing to free themselves, and the answer to that is most of the fucking work, including giving the ultimatum of war. But then we get a bunch of white people mad that their kids might feel guilty if we teach real history. It's not about your white child's feelings. Teaching accurate history isn't about white people's feelings, but that does sound like something that someone who's only ever been taught a white glorifying version of history would counter with. Ask why we ever felt like we needed to curate a false version of what white people did and did not do to black people to begin with. And then ask yourself why white-ass politicians are verbally attacking real history by calling it slurs, which is, by default, also the act of calling black people slurs.
Hey guys, my name is Chantal. I am the owner of Chantal J, where I sell dope Afrocentric jewelry for black women. And please understand something. Hear me clearly. Over here in this space, we're black, we're proud, and very loud about it.
This woman just said, if the trauma of slavery lives in the epigenetics of black people, she's a black woman, then doesn't the evil of slave owning live in the epigenetics of white people? And I would argue yes. My family, my heritage, I am Irish Mexican and a little bit of Germanic, but I also learned at my family reunion last year with our second cousins. Our oldest relative came over on the Mayflower and had a slave with him. Now, my grandmother married my grandpa, her being some mud of whiteness, and my grandfather being deep native Mexican. Her father was vindictively racist. His name was also Camillus, which is the most comically evil name I've ever heard. But she always says that her father's mother was the actual devil, and that we are breeding the evil out of us. And I actually feel it. I feel like a vindictive cruelty in my own mouth sometimes. I know words I could use to dismantle people, and I've learned to stop that impulse, but it only got easier when I stopped hating myself and falling in love with life and falling in love with the beauty of nature. But I think a lot of people, because they refuse to acknowledge that cruelty innate to their genetic makeup, they'll never escape it, and they will never make the conscious effort to breed it out of them. And obviously, like, I'm not saying you have to marry a person of color as a white person to, like, clean up the bloodline and the genetics. I'm saying you have to do a lot of deep and intentional work on yourself. You have to find that vein of malice and cut it at the root and suture it shut. And you just have to be aware of yourself.
I pissed off the Black community. I definitely pissed off the Black community, and it is what it is. I don't know what you want me to tell you. But apparently I am uneducated. So let's go through why I said what I said in that video, because I stand 10 toes down on it.
Hi, I'm Dr. C, and you have my attention.
Back in the 1600s, Black people, specifically Africans, were not just stolen. They were sold off by other Africans.
So the first mistake here is the use of the term black to describe Africans at the time of the transatlantic slave trade, as though all of the peoples of Africa had a common racial identity that is analogous to the usage of the term black in our contemporary context. While racial identities like white and black are international, they are not conceptualized consistently across countries. The meaning of those concepts are very much bound by cultural context. It is also worth noting that the ideas of whiteness and blackness didn't really begin to start developing until the mid-1400s, when the Portuguese sought to explain why it was okay for them to enslave Africans. It would then take another 200 to 300 years for the concept of race to really become concrete and be tied to biology through pseudoscience. All of that is to say that using the modern term black as it's used in our contemporary moment to describe Africans in the 15th, 16th, or even 17th century is gratuitously inaccurate. Furthermore, the continent of Africa is much larger than the entirety of North America, and so suggesting that those Africans are selling off each other as though they had a collective identity is at best woefully uninformed, or at worst virulently bigoted.
At that time, slavery wasn't really a term or a thing. They had indentured servants. These servants had time limits of how long they were going to be working. So after these 3 years, you're free to go. And honestly, truthfully, a lot of these men and women chose to become indentured servants because it wasn't a forever thing, it wasn't a long thing, and they would be able to freely come into America. Not saying that it was right, I'm just saying some of these men and women did go by choice so they could leave their home country.
While you may be able to find historical accounts of Africans putting themselves in indentured servitude in order to leave the continent, this is a phenomenon that is far more heavily associated with the poor Europeans attempting to come to the colonies in the Americas.
What I said in my video was that Black people created slavery. They started slavery. What I didn't specify was that I clarified this in the comments immediately after uploading, but just not in the video specifically. But before this drama took place, I clarified it right when I put up the video, that I was talking about in the US, not the entire world, because that predates, 10,000 years? I was not getting into all that. So I was talking about here at home.
You don't have to talk about 10,000 years worth of history. You could just talk about the last 600, because that's what's most pertinent to the history of American slavery, and also that'd be a much more reasonable amount of information for you to manage.
Now, he accumulated over 200 acres of land over that time, and he also accumulated about 15 to 16 slaves, 6 or 7 of them being African American and the rest being white. Or, I'm sorry, servants, not slaves. Now, things went awry a few years later, around 1653, I think, one of those, where one of his servants, last name of Kaser or Kasser, left because he claimed that his servitude was up and expired, so he left to go work for a different owner. Anthony Johnson then brought it to court and sued that family to have Kasser be returned to him. After a couple of years through the Virginia court system, they actually went in Johnson's favor and brought Kasser back to Anthony Johnson, claiming him as a slave for life, thus creating slavery, legal slavery, not servitude, legal slavery here in America. It was because of Anthony Johnson who was a black man, which is what I was referencing in my video. No matter how poor the delivery, which I admit it was atrocious, so I apologize for that.
So this is wrong on 4 counts, and the most superficial of which is that the court case with Anthony Johnson occurred in 1655. The second count is John Punch. He was an indentured servant from Africa who in 1640 attempted to break his contract by escaping with 2 other European servants. All 3 were captured and all 3 had time added on to their service. The 2 Europeans had 4 years added on to their service, but John Punch was sentenced to a life of servitude, effectively lifelong slavery. According to all of the available evidence, this was the first time that slavery had ever been used as a punishment for a crime, and the only reason for doing so, it seems, was that he was African. The third count of inaccuracy is that in 1619, 20 enslaved Africans were brought to a British colony in Virginia, thus establishing the British slave trade in the Americas. You may be familiar with a little book called the 1619 Project, which took its title from this historical event. And the fourth count is that in the early 1500s, the Spanish were already practicing a proto-racialized form of slavery by capturing indigenous peoples, not just in the Caribbean, but off of mainland North America as well, particularly the southeast coast and what is modern-day South Carolina. You know, I've done a few of these correction videos over the years, and I don't know of anyone who's been wrong 4 different ways off of one claim. It's kind of impressive, if I'm being honest.
As for the rest of it, yes, Black people are still enslaving Black people today. And yes, there were white slaves. Every single background and origin on the planet has been oppressed or enslaved or servants at some point in time.
Okay, real quick. Yes, almost every, if not every, cultural group in the world has experienced the phenomenon of forced labor at some point in their history, but the overwhelming majority of those experiences are not relevant to the creation of the United States. Next, there is no evidence of Black people owning Black people in the United States at this point in time, because remember, that was the entire premise of the video, was that we're talking about American slavery, not international slavery. And third, there is no record of any people that were deemed white at the time of having been enslaved in the history of the United States. Unless, of course, what this creator is doing is conflating indentured servitude with slavery after they just made a fine point throughout that video of separating the two phenomena.
The white race did not invent slavery, but they were the race that ended it.
Slavery has yet to end in the United States. It's just evolved into prison labor and the exploitation of undocumented immigrants, although somehow I suspect that this creator is not concerned about that. Now, credit where it's due. There were some white folks who helped to end chattel slavery, and they were the ones who sided with the Black and brown folks and were willing to point guns at other white folks.
I say in many, many other videos, if I missed anything or forgot anything or didn't know something, feel free to comment it below. I don't care. I'm always open to conversation. I love talking about this kind of stuff. But for tens of thousands of Black people to get up in my comments daily and call me uneducated or God knows what else, yet not one of them actually is doing the educating, how do you expect people to learn if you are unapproachable and mean? Riddle me.
Now, there is more in that creator's video that I'm just choosing not to engage with because some of it is wrong to the point of being confusing and I don't want to get bogged down. So I'm just going to end this with a podcast recommendation for those of you who are watching this and don't want to seem vibrantly uninformed, like the world's most ignorant peacock. The podcast is called Scene on Radio. That's SCENE. And the second season is called Seeing White. It is an excellent scholarly overview of how race became developed both internationally and specifically within the context of American slavery. Oh, and one last thing. I'm aware that the creator that I'm responding to is going through some serious medical concerns, and so I will not be tolerating any comments about that in the comment section.
Come back to World Moving Trend. You've seen the videos, you've seen the reactions. You see that there's a lot that is going on right now in the American community right now. A lot of people are confused, and they've been quite a lot of reaction. Some are trying to educate her on some certain things on what she does not know and what she also knows and all that. And it's quite funny at the same time. It's educative. Because, you know, there are perceptions to these stories and these histories. And sometimes if you're not reading from the right source or the right manuscript, you probably will not get the actual event of what happened and all that. Look at the light that was shared by a man in the video. I said in the first place there was nothing like slavery. It was servanthood. In America there was servanthood. People who serve people and they serve for a period of time. But one particular person tried to run away from his service, from his masters and his service tenure, and he was caught along with some white folks, and he was caught. And then after he was caught, they decided to elongate his service here, and the other white folks that were with him, they gave them 4 additional years, and for him he served lifetime, and that was where slavery started. For if they could give the fellow white guys 4 years in addition, how come they gave him a lifetime slavery and all that? And that's what he said. That's where slavery started from. And a lot of people are bashing her and telling her that we never started slavery. You guys brought slavery to us and all that. And the story is just up and down. The black communities are reacting enormously, and a lot of people are educating her, and as well as telling her that it's not from things are not seen the way you are looking at it. I think it's more of that. And then too, a lady also spoke about the genetic transfer in how do I put it, the bright word, in black man and a white man. So if a black man is created to endure and suffer, endure hardship and whatever it is, whatever life brings to it, that means the perpetrator of the hardship, of the wickedness, the white folks as well too also have these genetic traits in them and all that. And so it's quite very, 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 very worrisome, and as well as is large. So you just have to listen to both perspective and then draw up a conclusion. And my conclusion is that, whether you like it or not, as long as history is known, it's best that we check history, this manuscript, the right manuscript, to get the right information before we put it all out there. It's all about love and peace. See you guys on my next video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share with your friends and family if you enjoy this content. I'll be right back. See you. Cheers.